What a wonderful day to celebrate family. I mean, that's what I see when watch those videos of our young people that are growing up, graduating from high school today, and I just see the impact that a solid family had on their lives. And what an awesome thing for us to celebrate. Family, it's so important. This is a very special group. I could probably go on and on about these young people. This is a very special group for me because they are my first group of seniors here at Monrovia, and I got a lot of good stories I could probably tell. But I noticed last time we were telling stories, everybody started crying, so I'm not going to do that again. But no, congratulations to you guys, and we certainly love you and wish you the best in your future endeavors. We're going to start here. We're going to go back about 15 years ago, right at the turn of the century, in the year 2000. I was beginning my senior year at Madison County High School. We're about 2 weeks in to the fall semester. And I'm walking into class. And this class is my toughest class that I had while I was at Madison County High School. It was college prep English with Miss Hass. And Mrs. Hass, she was tough. She was very demanding in what she required from you. And she was very strict. And she was one of those teachers, if you got on her bad side, you knew it. And you're probably going to stick around there for a while. And for me, I didn't really get off on the best foot for the semester. I didn't do my summer reading, and I bombed the quiz on the first day. That was a review of what we were supposed to read over the summer. So I started off on the wrong foot, did bad on the first quiz that we took, and so I'm trying to work my way back into her good graces. So you know, I maybe even study a little bit to try to do well in class. If she answers a question, I want to make sure that I'm the one that steps up and has the answer for the question in class. And then if she asks for a volunteer, of course, I want to be the one that goes up and helps because I'm trying to get back on her good side. So we're walking into class. Everybody's kind of talking, settling into their seats, and the bell rings. Mrs. Hass is in the back. She's sitting at her desk. And she looks out over the class, maybe she's going through some notes, reading a book, and she says, before we get started with our lesson, I want you guys to get that off the board. And so, you know, I'm all excited. I'm like, an opportunity to help out. So I jump up out of my seat, I run up to the board, grab the eraser, and I start going to work. And about 2 swipes in, I hear Mrs. Hass say, Chase, what are you doing? And at that moment, I realize I'm in big trouble. I did not comprehend what she was trying to say. You see, what she was saying was, you guys get those notes and write them down in your notebook. But I took it as, go erase that off the board. And I'm like, my semester's done. I'm going to fail college prep English. I'm going to have to come back next year. Luckily enough, Mrs. Hass had a good sense of humor. And actually, from that point on, it kind of put me back in her good graces because she was able to laugh at me a little bit. And so I made it through the semester, and I graduated, and everything worked out just fine. But the point is, there was that moment when I'm standing at the board, erasing, and I hear Mrs. Hass say, what are you doing? And I'm thinking, if I would have just understood 2 minutes ago what I know now. You ever had one of those moments? Where you're in the middle of something, you're caught up in all the trouble that it brings, and you think to yourself, man, if I just would have realized what somebody was telling me, then I wouldn't be caught up in this mess. Our lesson this morning is 2 very simple points. It's specifically designed for our graduates, but I think it has an impact on all of us. It's something we can all learn from. But these 2 points, I want you guys to listen to. And I think these are 2 of those points that if you apply them to your life, it'll keep you out of some of those bad situations. It'll help you stay on the right course in your relationship with God. And the first one is this. Very simply, commit to the Lord. I mean, we get this word commit a lot. Right around February and even during football season, I'm a sports guy, I guess. But I hear this word when it comes to high school athletes and when they commit to a certain school. And if they get a chance to go before the cameras and they have a bunch of hats lined up and they pick the school they want to go to and they put it on their head and they're committing to go play football to accept a scholarship from that school. And you can tell the ones that have truly committed. They're the ones that are putting it on their social media accounts, on Twitter and Facebook, and they're the ones that are actively going out to their friends and other ball players out there and saying, hey, I'm going to Auburn, you guys need to come go to Auburn with me. Or I'm going to Alabama, it's a great place to go, y'all need to come to Alabama with me. Did I just say it's a great place to go? So, the point is, if someone is truly committed to that school, you see a lot of times these high school football players say they're going somewhere and then 2 months down the road and say, oh, I'm calling another press conference, I'm committing again to another school. I don't really believe that they ever committed in the first place. But the ones that are truly committed, it begins to show in their actions and the things they do. And that's my first point. As you move on to the next phase of your life, one of the most important things you can do is commit to the Lord. Commit to his plan for your life. In Proverbs 16:3, it says, commit to the Lord whatever you do, and your plans will succeed. What an awesome promise we have from God. If you put God first, if you commit to him in everything you do, he promises that you will be successful. Jesus makes that same point in Mark chapter 11, verses 23 and 24. He says, truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be taken up and thrown into the sea, and does not doubt in the heart, but believes that what he says will come to pass, it will be done for him. What a powerful statement. Therefore, I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. Commit to the Lord, and your plans will be successful. But I don't want to just leave it there. I think there's some context that we need to grasp, that we need to get a hold of when it comes to this quote from Jesus in Mark chapter 11. Mark chapter 11 begins with a triumphal entry, is what they call it. Jesus riding in on a colt. They lay the olive branches down and wave the olive branches just as it was prophesied. And they say, Hosanna in the highest. And so from the very outset, you can see there's something special about this guy. And not that they didn't know it before. And so we go along in the story. And it's the next day. They've left Jerusalem, and they're in Bethany, and now they're on their way back to Jerusalem. And as they're going along, it says Jesus, hit the button in my pocket. It says Jesus was leading his disciples, and Peter looked up, and he saw, and Jesus saw a fig tree. And it says Jesus was hungry. And we pick up in verse 12 of Mark chapter 11. Now the next day when they had come out from Bethany, he was hungry. And seeing from afar a fig tree having leaves, he went to see if perhaps he would find something on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. And you know the story, what happens. In response to that, Jesus says, let no one eat fruit from you ever again. And this is an important note. And his disciples heard it. Okay, so we kind of go on from there. There's kind of another text sandwiched in between, and we see Jesus. He gets into Jerusalem and he gets his workout in, flipping over tables in the temple. Okay, and so after that takes place, they leave later on that night, and we come to the next day. And in verse 20, it says, now in the morning, as they passed by, they saw the fig tree dried up from the roots. And Peter, remembering, said to him, Rabbi, look, the fig tree which you cursed, it's withered away. And Peter's surprised by this. And I look at, and I think about Peter and I say, why are you surprised? You've been following this guy around. You spent so much time with him. You've seen him perform miracles. You've heard him teach. You watched his triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And just a couple of days ago, he said, this tree is cursed, may no one eat fruit from you again, and you see it again, and you're surprised? The first point I want to make from that text this morning, don't get Peter syndrome. I think just being a Christian in and of itself, that means you believe in God's promises. That means you believe in God's power. You believe he's capable of doing great things. And I would go so far as to say you've seen God do great things. Perhaps you've experienced God doing great things in the lives of those around you and even in your life, perhaps. But don't get Peter syndrome in the way that you begin to say, well, I'm not sure if he can do that for me. And then you're surprised. Trust in God. But do you see Jesus' reaction? It's later on in the verse. Have any of you ever watched Monday Night Countdown on ESPN? It comes on right before Monday Night Football. And basically what it is, there's a host and two former football players and a former coach. And they're sitting up on the desk, and they talk about the highlights from the game from the day before, all the games that took place, and they preview the upcoming matchup. Okay? And there's this one segment on the show where they basically show the bloopers from the day before. It's kind of a comedy of errors, perhaps. Sometimes they call it the not top 10. But in this particular show, the segment is called, Come On, Man. And so what happens is they show these plays, like maybe there's a guy in the end zone, he's got the game-winning touchdown pass, or hits him right in the hands and he drops it. Or a defensive guy, a linebacker going for a tackle, and he goes to pull the guy down, but instead he pulls his pants down instead of the guy. And one of the announcers will follow those clips up and say, Come on, man. And in my mind, when I picture this scene taking place, and Peter says, wow, look, that fig tree is dead. You said it was going to be dead, and now it's dead. And Jesus looks at him and says, come on, man. And he says, have faith in God. You know what faith is. Hebrews 11:1 says, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. We've all got faith in something or other. We live by conviction, whether you realize it or not. You probably got up this morning, you went to your shower, you reached down to the shower knob, and you turned that knob with a conviction that when it's turned, water will start pouring out of the shower head, right? So you went to the refrigerator to prepare your cereal. You got the bowl out, you opened the refrigerator, you pulled the milk out with a conviction that your refrigerator has remained cold enough to keep that milk good. When you sat down in the auditorium, you sat down with a conviction that that seat was strong enough to hold you up. Some it took a little more conviction than others. But we live each and every day with conviction. And that's exactly what faith is. That's exactly what faith in God looks like. We believe in his promises. We stand on those promises. Faith in God means I know that I know that I know that God is who he says he is. When Jesus says, that fig tree, it's time for you to die, you're not doing any good in this world, that it's gonna happen. So with this framework, with this context, we revisit Mark 11, verses 23 and 24. Jesus says, come on, man, have faith in God. And he continues, truly, I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be taken up and thrown into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will come to pass, it will be done for him. I want to stop there and just take a minute to realize what that verse is saying. I want you to understand, this is not some kind of conceptual language. It's Jesus. And we know that he's kind of in between Jerusalem and Bethany. And so he's at the foot of the Mount of Olives. And so I see this scene taking place. And he points over to the Mount of Olives. And he says, you see that mountain? If you say to that mountain, be taken up and thrown into the sea, and you don't doubt it, but you believe it, that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to come to pass. It's going to be done for you by God. That's the kind of God that we serve. That's how powerful he is. Do you have that kind of conviction? That's what it means to commit to God, to put your faith and trust in him, to be convicted that he is who he says he is. And he continues, therefore, I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. To me, that says all things are possible. With God, nothing is impossible. He can and will do amazing things in your life if you submit to his will, if you put your faith and trust in him. It says, if you believe that you have received it, it will be yours. What a powerful statement from God. I remember singing as a child, he's got the whole world in his hands. And when I think about this concept, it's exactly what I think about. He's in complete control of this entire world. And he has the power to do amazing things. But I think also in the context of this setting, we need to remember who he's talking to. And Peter. Now, Peter wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. He was a bit defiant at times. There were times where he doubted God. He even denied Jesus. We know this about Peter, so we know he's not perfect. But we do know about Peter that he's a saved man, that he's a disciple of Jesus Christ, that he's committed his life to God. And I think when we talk about Peter, a committed disciple, and you think about what he's going to ask of God, the more he becomes like God, the more he becomes like Jesus, the more his thoughts and desires are going to be what God wants in his life. The more disciple behavior he takes on, the more his requests, the more the things he asks are going to be disciple wants and disciple needs. And the point there, if you're committed to God, it's going to begin to change the things you ask for from God. In Romans chapter 12 and verse 2, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. So commit to God, and we begin to be transformed into his image, into the image of Jesus Christ. And as a result, our wants and our desires begin to change to what God wants. And when that happens, anything that you want is within your grasp. Nothing is impossible because God is in control of this world. So number one, the most important point of the lesson is to recognize how great God's power is. To know that he's in control, and for you to commit your life to him. Commit your education to him. Commit your career choice to him. Commit where you're staying, where you hang out, what you do, who you talk to him. And your plans are going to be successful. Number two, invest in community. We've talked a little bit about that this morning, and the families that came forward in our community with MYG. Also, it's apparent in this congregation, a great community. But I think of this word invest. Let's say I have a business. Okay, I told you guys about my incredible rap skills a few weeks ago. Let's say I'm going to start a new record label. A hip-hop record label. And I come to you and I say, I need a couple of investors. All you got to do is throw in $500,000 a piece, and we're going to get this thing off the ground, and we're going to turn this into an awesome company. To invest in that means you give me some money. And as a result of giving those resources to me, you become a part of this label. Okay? And I think that's what it means when we invest in something. It doesn't have to be money. It's our time, our resources, our thoughts, our decisions. When we invest in something, we become a part of it. What's the greatest command? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. That's what community is, right? It means we invest in each other with love. And I think sometimes we think about community and we say, I want to go be a part of this community, and we get this idea we're just going to take from the community. And I want to experience the community, but I want to hang in the back and see what it's all like before I really get involved. Well, being part of the community means you're investing in the community. It means you're diving in. You're becoming a part of it. You're giving of your resources, whatever those are. And as a result, this community grows together. That's what the church is designed to be. All of us working together in community. And it's the second command, love your neighbor as yourself. That's not always the easiest thing to do. I learned this back in my TV days, my first job in Victoria, Texas. I might have told this story before, so if I have, I apologize. I was working, filling in for our main sports anchor. I was the weekend guy, and he was out for the week on vacation, so I was filling in. And I was getting to do the 6 o'clock and the 10 o'clock news every night, and so it was a pretty big deal. I was pretty excited. And Monday through Friday. I had to always work Saturday and Sunday. So I'm doing this Monday through Friday thing, and I'm feeling pretty good about how it's going, and I got my scripts together well. I put on a good sports cast, and I thought it was a pretty good show. So I get a call to the newsroom after we get done. And my news director calls me in his office, and he says, I want to talk to you about your show. You know, I'm feeling pretty good about it. And he says, we just got a phone call from a lady that said, you need to brush your hair. And I'm like, yeah, I probably forgot. I was in a hurry and doing something new, and I probably forgot to brush my hair. So I was on this spiritual high. Well, not spiritual high, excuse me. I was on this high of my job, this professional high, we should say, doing well at what I thought I was putting together a good sports cast, and all of a sudden, I hear this feedback, and it knocks me down a couple levels. And my news director followed that up with, she was right. Your hair looked pretty bad on TV. But you know, if I would have taken that advice and if I would have said, okay, I forgot to do my hair, I'm a failure, this week was terrible, I'm just going to quit and I'm going to move back home to Alabama. I may have been here a lot sooner, but I didn't. I stuck with it. And I bounced back, and I was successful. Next thing I knew, I was the 6 and 10 news anchor, and I came back to Alabama with a job as a news anchor. But when we invest in the community, it's going to hurt sometimes. We're going to get kicked sometimes along the way. But if we continue to pour ourselves out, it's going to feel awfully good when we grow together. Because that's what it's all about, loving your neighbor as yourself. This next photo is of the redwoods out in California. You see these massive trees. You can see the path there at the bottom, and down here at the bottom there's a person. I didn't see it at first, and I just hit the button in my pocket again. At the bottom, you see this person. So you can see how massive these trees truly are. And you see these trees and you think, man, these are some awesome trees. They must have some incredible roots. They must be really planted down in the ground in order to grow so large, in order to stay up when the storms come through. You know what's interesting about redwoods? The root system doesn't go that deep. What makes them stand in times of trouble and storms is their roots go into the ground and they intertwine with one another. So these trees, these massive, grand, incredible trees are joined together. If they were to stand on their own, they're not going to survive because the roots don't go down that deep. But when they're together, there's this solid foundation. And it's the only way that they can survive. I want to suggest to you this morning that for us as Christians, the only way that our spiritual life can survive is when we invest in one another. When we become a community, when we're intertwined in our root system. And without it, we're sure to fail. We only need to look at the example of the early church in Acts 2, verses 42 and 44. And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. That was a community that leaned on one another, that invested in one another. If you're going off to school for our young folks, perhaps the most important thing you can do is get invested in a community. To find a church family where you can get involved and wrap those roots around one another so you can thrive, so you can grow strong and mature in your faith. When I went to Auburn, that looked like the Auburn Christian Student Center. Within this community, we had an incredible campus minister who led us. We had a great group of elders at the Auburn Church of Christ. And we had a system set up there where when the freshmen came in, they got hooked up with an older brother or older sister is what they called them. And we'd spend time together and hang out. And I didn't see Wayne this morning. I don't know if he's here. But Wayne was my big brother, Wayne Baswell, at Auburn. And then beyond that, at the Auburn Church of Christ, we had adopted parents. And so there was a couple that would take on a couple students. And they would spend time together. They would get in each other's lives. They would invest in one another. If you want to be sure to be successful, invest in community. Spend some of your time, your resources. It may take some sacrifice. Sometimes it's hard to get away from everything going on. To make it to a specific night for a devotional, or to hang out with the old people that are my adopted parents. You have to maybe bail out on some friends that want you to go a different direction. But if you take the time to invest in community, you will reap the benefits. You will grow strong and mature in your faith, just like those redwoods. I have another example of what that looks like that I experienced just a couple days ago. If you don't know, this picture is from Montgomery, the state championship baseball game from Madison Academy. The baseball team went down there and won 2 straight games to win the championship. It was an awesome day. But when I was there, I got to see what community looks like. Kevin and Christy Smith, they went down there to watch these games. They went on Wednesday night. The games got canceled because of rain, but they stuck around and waited till the next day till the game started. You got to know about Kevin and Christy. They have an 8th grader and a sophomore at Auburn. So they don't have a student. They don't have a ball player on the team. But Kevin and Christy are so connected, are so much a part of this community that they knew they had to be down there. And they were. And it was impressive to see because I sat right in front of them during the game. And the game would get intense. The team would start coming back. And they'd get nervous. And they were so into the game. But it's not because they love baseball that much. I know they like baseball and they're into that. But that's not why those games were so important to them. Those games are so important because those kids, those young people on that field were so important to them. They were invested in their lives. When they get a strikeout, Kevin would be the one jumping up and down, screaming. When it would be a full count, he would be the one biting his fingernails, not literally, but he'd be that nervous. That's what it means when we invest in one another. That's what it looks like. So this morning, if you don't take anything away, take these 2 simple points. Commit to the Lord and invest in community. And that's especially true for you guys. That's true for everyone in here. If you want to stand firm, if you want to grow mature like those big redwoods, you must commit to the Lord and invest in community. And one final thought as a conclusion this morning. It's just a quote. This was actually from a marriage sermon, but it really made so much sense to offer to our graduates today. I wanted to share it with you. It says, "So today, however much you rejoice that you have reached your goal, you will be just as thankful that God's will and God's way have brought you here. And however confidently you accept responsibility for your action today, you may and will put it today with equal confidence into God's hands." Congratulations. This is an awesome stepping stone. This is an awesome postmark in your life. A great achievement that you've made graduating from high school. But as you rejoice, know that it's God that helped you get there. And as you go forward in your future pursuits and what's planned for your life, know that God has great plans for your life. And know that He can do awesome things through you, each and every one of you, if you'll put your faith and trust in Him.